Hey everybody, thanks for joining in. As promised in my last video where I introduced the structural frame, I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about some specific design options that you can have as a leader, thinking through what structure is best for your team and your larger organization. I wanted to show you just a few of the models that you can use as potential options and to stimulate your thought about how people in your organization and on your team interact with each other and how decisions are made and how your internal process works on efficiency, again, remember, within the environment and context that you operate and live. Think of these as just visual logos and models designed to get you thinking about how you differentiate and how you integrate. Remember, differentiation being who are your people, how do you hire, what specialized roles do you need in order to accomplish your goals. And then the integration idea is how do we connect and bring people together around which processes, around which projects, and in what ways do people work together and coordinate to actually get the job done. So as you head into the group assignment where you build your own structure for a hypothetical startup sport company, remember there is no one right way to organize or one right model to follow. And real life says that teams and organizations often use a combination of these models in order to get the job done, and as well as they improvise. They change their structure. They morph the model as the environment changes around them. So here we go. You're looking at sort of the generic template of the model that Henry Mintzberg developed. So Mintzberg was a theorist out of Harvard working in the 1970s and basically taking the typical two-dimensional model of organizational structure that you typically see, more of the box and lines image, and he expanded those old models into more of a three-dimensional model where you can see he identified 5 major functional areas. These functional areas are basically groups of people that you hire to do specific jobs or roles, but then he also showed the relative importance of each of these 5 areas, and that's where this third dimension comes into the typical boxes and lines charts that we used to see that were more two-dimensional. So the model says that people are hired into functions or jobs and roles according to 5 different areas. Remember, this is generic and it will morph into many different versions of this generic model. But he says at the bottom, every organization needs an operating core, and this operating core is basically the people who get the core thing done. So on a sports team, this would be the athletes, the people that people pay money to see, and the college basketball players that generate big-time sponsorship revenues and fans and seats during March Madness. So the operating core are the people who primarily are responsible for producing the product and getting the job done. If this was a structure for a school like in Riverside Unified School District, then the operating core would be the teachers responsible with educating students in the classroom. Up in the model here, we have the first line of management, or the first line of the administrative oversight of the business or the team. These are the people who work to ensure that people are on task, that the goals are being accomplished, and that this operating core and others are coordinated in their efforts to do the work of the organization. And then the top of this vertical part of the diagram here is senior level leaders. It's called the strategic apex, but these are the people primarily responsible for determining structure, for paying attention to the external and internal environments that the sports team or the school or even, let's say, the shoe company exists. These are sort of the people on the watchtower that are supposed to modify direction and change structure and be the architects overall of the organizational design. So here we have the primary structure of the organization, and you'll notice in this general model here, it's more vertically oriented. Sure, at the operating core, there's some lateral coordination, there's some equal sharing of decision making and operating, but as decision making complexity changes, it's more vertically coordinated. From here, we have two more components of the organization that come alongside the main production line, so to speak, and these are those who support the primary work as well as provide technical expertise for the primary work. So first, support staff are people who help support the main product or core technology or process. So let's say in an athletics department or for the basketball team, this would be equipment managers, sports medicine staff, compliance officers, student service, university support staff that are affiliated with the university and help the sports team compete and accomplish their goals. And then on the other side here would be the technostructure. This would be example of a college sports team. This might be a sports psychologist who you bring in as a consultant, or accountants or even finance officers who you seek advice from in order to manage budgets and operate effectively throughout the year. As well as any legal expertise. If you don't have an in-house, let's say, attorney at the university, you would bring in legal technical experts to advise you, let's say, how to comply with Title IX or ADA, or even compliance issues related to recruiting. Again, the attorney here could be a member of the support staff, the larger on the payroll of the university, or they could be a consultant that you bring in as a technical expert. I'll quickly throw at you some specific versions of that generic template that we just looked at. And the first is the simplest and easiest structure that you might find in a sport business or organization. And this is primarily called the mom and pop or entrepreneur model. This structure, as you can tell, is simple because it needs to be. There are usually few workers and there's clear lines of authority, and it's highly centralized, meaning the decisions come primarily through the mom, the pop, or the owner, entrepreneur at the top, and then there's an operating core that falls in line with the key decisions from the top. So the person at the top, whether it's mom, pop, or an owner, directly supervises and controls the core technology and how things get done. Direct supervision and oversight by that person at the top. What's the benefit of this? It's flexible, it's nimble, you can move very quickly as the environment changes because it's so simple and small and there are relatively few people involved. What's the challenge of this? The operating core doesn't have a lot of freedom and flexibility to make their own decisions, and as you get larger in your hiring and in the product that you're producing, the need for a more complex structure usually starts to require you to change. Example of a structural design is the machine organization or bureaucracy. This is the classic McDonald's example that we talked about in our last video, and this is a highly useful structure for businesses that have uniform and consistent processes that need direct and highly formal oversight to make sure that things get done efficiently and in the same way over and over and over again. So let's say you are a shoe company like New Balance, or you are McDonald's trying to make a consistent cheeseburger. You need a consistent operating core, and then you need several layers of management or administrative structure to ensure that these processes are consistent and coordinated, and your accomplishment of goals and your production really is like a machine or a factory that the structural frame always pursues. So you see, not only do they ensure consistency through several layers of management, but they also have large technical experts that advise and consult and then they have large support staff. Let's say in the case of McDonald's, things like shipping and product lines that ensure consistency of food and materials needed to make items on the menu. Moving on to a quite different visual structural design, that of the professional bureaucracy. So notice the difference in wording. We go from a machine bureaucracy to a professional bureaucracy, from McDonald's to Harvard, and companies and organizations like a Harvard, where you have a large operating core, in this case a very professional and specialized operating core. And this operating core, again, is primarily responsible for the core technology, or in this case, of Harvard's case, the education of the undergrads and the grad students who might be attending courses and paying a bunch of tuition. And then you have a very few or small number of administration here, because the nature of your operating core is so specialized. And yet then this means that at the operating core level, the oversight doesn't necessarily come from the middle managers like the department chairs or the deans, but it comes from within, and coordination is more lateral, and faculty at Harvard get to seek ongoing professional development and training on their own. So the training and the oversight of your so-called workers in this case is collegial and happens at the level of the operating core. So this would be a true lateral coordination at the operating core level. So here, as you would imagine, there's a very small need for a technical staff, because these are your technical experts. There still is a moderate need for support staff, student services, housing, advising, things like that. And then there is still a higher level administrative group of overseers. These would be vice presidents and the president, who can engage with higher level decision making for matters that don't necessarily relate to the work of the operating core. So these guys at the top and gals at the top could be considering things like fundraising, or responding to an economic downturn, or the public health pandemic that's currently going on. And they are actually freed up to make those decisions related to the external environment, because this operating core of specialists is dialed in and doing the actual work of the organization. So the primary benefit of this setup is that those specialists in the operating core get the freedom to do what they do best without the overbearing influence of too many middle managers controlling the process. But then implicit in that is the primary negative. Without these multiple layers of oversight and coordination, an organization like this can be very slow to respond to changes in the external environment. Sure, within the operating core, they may be very quick to respond to individual differences, let's say in a particular science or in a particular discipline academically, but at the top, they're not as quick to respond because they don't have as many layers of oversight and management. And so in fact, if this small number of managers actually tried to steer this large ship of the operating core, they can run into a lot of resistance here by this operating core, and can be very slow to change and adapt to the environment in which they exist. So building on the professional bureaucracy model, this divisional organization or diversified organization basically takes the professional bureaucracy and scales it into multiple units of that professional bureaucracy. So let's say things like the California State University system. If California Baptist University was more like a cross between a machine bureaucracy and a professional bureaucracy, which is exactly what I would call CBU's structure, a blending of these two, then the Cal State University system could be a divisional version of that blending, or it could even be a divisional version of a professional bureaucracy, much the same way as a Harvard. So you get some level of independence within each of these bureaucratic structures here, while still coordinating and maintaining oversight of the organization as a whole through the strategic apex at the top here and through these layers of management control. So the primary benefit is the semi-autonomous nature of these individual structures, but then as you can imagine, the primary potential drawback is a disconnect between these individual units and the larger organization as a whole, where there can be a lot of negotiation here. And you might even say, like, professional sport leagues operate at this basic structural configuration as well. Remember, they might modify this a little bit, but essentially each individual sport franchise could be these individual units reporting to a larger league office here in the NFL or Major League Baseball and so on. And our quick talk here with the most interesting and innovative potential structure for an organization's design, and that's the ADHocracy. This is sort of we're winging our structure because we have to respond to such an unknown or uncertain or rapidly changing environment. You'll notice even by the dotted lines here that says about all we need to know. The operating core, the people who are primarily responsible for creating the product and for getting the job done, is emerging, is unclear, and is rapidly changing and morphing as needed. And while there is still a fairly consistent and solid level of management leading to a strategic apex of the top decision makers, again, the primary workers and specialists who are getting the work done are rapidly changing in real time. So this is often for entrepreneurial think tank startup sort of organizations, as well as you see the cool stories from the chapter, special warfare units in the military like SEAL Team 6, who need to follow a clear chain of command, but they also need real freedom to respond and adapt and adjust to their fellow operating core in real time according to the particular mission that's in front of them. That's all for now. That's a brief overview designed to help you be more familiar with these design options as you head into the Build Your Own Structure assignment for tonight. So enjoy that, and I'll talk to you soon.